Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. Welcome to another edition of Food Farm Talk, where we celebrate food and honor those who champion the cause of food in society.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM here in Guelph. I'm one of your hosts, Emily Duncan, and the show is also hosted by Abdul Rahim Abdullahi. And today we are talking about a local event that's happening in Guelph, a food event that I really enjoy every year that I've been to since I've lived in Guelph. And our guest today is John Dennis, who is the organizer of the event called the Urban Sugaring Project. John, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And so John and I know each other really well as we're both coordinators of the Guelph Tool Library. And so today I just wanted to let the wider Guelph community know a little bit more about maple syrup and how we can make maple syrup in our own city.
Nice. I'm the coordinator with the Urban Sugaring Project. We've been running now for 5 years. We were off last year, but we're back and better than ever this year. The project is people tapping their own trees, and then we pool the sap that's collected. We have volunteers that will boil down the sap and turn it into maple syrup and return it to the participants. So we kick it off on Saturday, February the 1st. We're going to have a free pancake breakfast. So even if you don't have a maple tree or don't want to tap your tree, come on down. We're going to be at the Church of the Apostles, which is 86 Glasgow Street North, and it's from 9 until 11:30 in the morning. We will have free pancakes with maple syrup. We even have gluten-free and vegan options.
Wow, that sounds like a really great event to kind of get the start of the syrup season going. And so at this event, when people come, obviously enjoy a delicious pancake breakfast, but also be able to learn more about the project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the day we distribute our kits. So if you have a tree and you want to tap it, we rent kits. They're $10 each. We asked in addition for a $10 deposit. Each kit comes with a spigot or a spile to tap your tree. It comes with a metal bucket that you hang off of the spigot to collect the sap, and then a food-grade container, which you will put the sap into and then bring it to a location where we collect all the sap and then take it off to boil it. And then we give you instructions. At the day at the pancake breakfast, there'll be a display showing how to tap your tree. There'll be volunteers that can sort of explain the process to you. We'll talk about, what's the best side of the tree to tap your tree, when to tap your tree, and what to expect.
That sounds like a really informative event, and it sounds like something that a lot of people in Guelph might be interested in doing. There's a lot of maple trees in Guelph.
Yeah, so that kind of was one of the reasons we started the project. At the Guelph Tool Library and this project, we kind of looked around and we said, hey, what resources are there that are not being used, and can we do a better job of using those resources? And someone brought to my attention there's over 3,000 trees, maple trees in Guelph, and the vast majority of those go untapped. And so then we asked the question, why not? Some of the feedback we got was, we don't have the equipment to tap the tree. We don't know how to do it. The boiling process can be really hard. Anyone who's actually boiled the sap down to maple syrup knows it takes a long time. And often people that have done it in their houses have found that it takes the wallpaper off the walls. So we thought, let's take away the hardest part, which is the boiling, and just get people to enjoy and be able to tap their trees and then participate in this collective activity, which is the Urban Sugaring Project.
I think that's great. And it's a great way for people to learn more about it. And so just to give out a little bit more information, if someone can't make it to the breakfast on Saturday, let's say I know I have a maple tree in my yard and I want to tap it. I pay $10 and give a $10 deposit and I get my kit. What else might I need to be able to do this?
Sure. Well, it's all laid out in the instructions that we'll give to everyone that gets a kit. Essentially, the things that you need to bring are a drill bit and a drill. And then really just pay attention, because we typically email to everyone and say, hey, now is the time to tap your tree, and here are the locations that we're going to be at, so you can come bring us your sap. But to put a spigot into a tree is basically, you need a drill or a hand auger, and you need a bit. It's typically a 7/16 bit. And you drill a hole about 1.5 to 2 inches deep at a slightly upward angle. When you tap your tree, you want to make sure you do it on the south side as much as possible. Southeast is the best. And the reason we do that is because when the sun rises in the morning, that's typically where the sunlight's going to hit. It's going to start to warm up the tree, and that's the side typically where the sap will flow. Sometimes you get microclimates and things can change, such as, if you're close to your house, or if there's a little microclimate caused by different trees. But for the most part, you want to get a good location to tap your tree. We'll also talk about where the best spot is to tap in your tree, things to avoid. There's lots of little tips and hints that we give out to people, but most certainly the process is not really that hard, and a lot of people that do it, they find that they get a surprising amount of sap out of their trees.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation to kind of get people to understand about the work that's involved in getting it set up. What if I didn't have a drill or a drill bit? Is there an amazing place in Guelph where I could go borrow one?
Yeah, sure. If you're a member of the Guelph Tool Library, we have both battery-operated cordless drills. We also have hand augers, so if you want to do it sort of the old school style, we have the correct drill bits as well. So, yeah, one of the really neat things we're doing this year at the Tool Library is we're actually putting together a couple of kits. So there are people that they just want to tap the trees and boil the sap themselves, and I think that's awesome. But again, there's that issue of them not necessarily having all the right equipment. One of the challenges when making maple syrup is figuring out, okay, when is it done? So a lot of people, they'll simply use, the visual, look at it, taste it, go, that pretty much looks like maple syrup to me. But if you really want to make sure that you have maple syrup, you need to measure it in some ways. And there's a lot of ways to do it. Well, one of the things that we're great and got a donation from someone was a hygrometer, which is a device for measuring the density of the maple syrup that you're producing. So the thing you want to do when you're making maple syrup is you want to boil it to the point where the sugar concentration is at what's considered to be 66 brix. That's maple syrup. That's the concentration of sugar in solution is at 66%. So we now have kits that people can, if they're members of the Tool Library, can come and borrow. They will have a cup for holding the syrup, the measuring device, hydrometer, as well as some filters so they can use. Because one of the challenges when you make maple syrup is that when you boil it, you get sediment or sand that precipitates out, and you want to make sure that you filter that out. Otherwise, it gives the final product kind of a gritty taste. We have all those in a kit, and you can come and you can borrow it, and then it can help you to boil it at home, do it yourself, and make your own maple syrup.
That's awesome. So you can make that perfect golden syrup. I mean, I've made maple syrup before, and sometimes you get a bit of a range in the color. And some people like a darker, thicker syrup for cooking or something like that. But I like that perfect golden syrup on my pancakes.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me about why the different colors. There's a number of reasons why. One, it may have to do with how the syrup is made. So a lot of the commercial maple syrups that you'll see, they tend to have a lighter color that seems to be what the consumers are asking for now. And partially that's the way that's done is for commercial producers, they will typically run the sap through a reverse osmosis process, which is a way to eliminate the water from the solids. So you start with a more concentrated product. So there's really less boiling that goes on, and quite often that will produce a lighter color when you're done. The other thing that happens is how you boil it. So again, commercial producers will tend to use natural gas or propane to boil their syrup. So they're doing really large quantities, so they need to have a steady source. If you're doing smaller batches, such as myself, I just burn with wood, and I'm doing it out in the open, you will get a different consistency in your burn with firewood versus propane. You also tend to get a darker color. One of the nice things with the maple syrup that I produce is because I'm doing it with wood, it tends to get a slightly smoky flavor to it, which is something that I really enjoy. So different colors goes back to how you produce it. The other thing that can affect it is when the sap is being collected. So one of the things that happens is the complexity and the nature of the sap changes as you go through the season, and it really has to do with the minerals and proteins that are dissolved in the sap. At the very start of the season, you may boil and you may find you have a lighter color, and then as you go through the season, it tends to get darker. It's not always the case, but that's been what I've found when I've made maple syrup. I get the light stuff right at the start, and then as I go through the season and I get closer to the end, it tends to get darker.
Yeah, those are some great insights to kind of the variations between maple syrup. And it sounds like through the Urban Sugaring Project, as a community, we'll be making our own unique batch of syrup.
Yeah, that's right. So what happens is all of the sap we collect is pooled together and then all boiled down. There's a lot of advantages to doing a really large volume. It allows for a consistency. If you're only doing, say, like a couple of liters, then your final product tends to be like a really small amount. And so it's hard to get a nice consistent syrup. I always tell people, they say, well, how much boiling is involved? Well, it depends on the type of tree. The best trees to get maple syrup from are sugar maples. And with the sugar maple, the ratio, the boil down ratio is about 40-1. So for every 40 liters of sap you collect from a sugar maple, it boils down to about 1 liter of syrup. But we don't care what kind of tree you have. Pretty much any maple tree will give you, any maple tree will give you sap that you can boil down. The difference is the sugar concentration. So red and silver, those are fine trees as well. A lot of the trees you'll find in Guelph are Norways. All of those trees will run and give you sap, and it just requires a bit more boiling. Those trees tend to be about an 80-1 ratio, so there's double the boiling that goes into it, which is also tends to be why ours is a little bit darker, just because we have to boil it that much more to get it down to syrup.
Yeah, so there's a whole mix of different types of maples that are going into this maple syrup. And I have to tell a bit of a funny story that 2 years ago when I first got my first kit from the Urban Sugaring Project I was excited to collect some sap, and I asked my landlord which tree in our yard was maple. And so I tapped what I thought was the right tree. And then a few weeks later, I hadn't gotten any sap, and I thought, oh, maybe it's just too cold. And then my landlord came around and said, you've tapped an elm tree. You're not going to get any sap. So it's winter, the leaves are gone. It could be hard to tell which type of tree you're tapping. So be sure that you get some sort of maple.
Yeah. On our instructions, there's an excellent link that we tell people to go to if they want to figure out what type of tree they have. It's produced by the Ontario Ministry of Environment. It's called the Tree Atlas, and it gives you sort of a way to figure out what kind of a tree you have by looking at the bark, if you know what the leaves look like, kind of how the shape of the tree itself. So it's not perfect. Often the best thing to do if you have an arborist who that can come and take a look at your tree, that may be the best way to figure out what kind of tree you have, but it's a good way to sort of figure out what type of maple tree you have. Many of the older trees in Guelph are sugar maples. I suspect 100 years ago, maybe when those trees were young or being planted, they were planted with the intent of people making maple syrup. It's just people have gotten away from it. So we're just trying to get people back to thinking about, hey, there's a maple tree and I want to tap it and I want to get maple syrup from it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. If you're just tuning in now, you're listening to Food Farm Talk on CFRU Radio 93.3 FM in Guelph. I'm your host, Emily Duncan, and today we're here with John Dennis from Guelph's Urban Sugaring Project and the Guelph Tool Library, telling us a little bit more about how you can be a part of making maple syrup in the city of Guelph this season. So we've kind of walked people through what the setup of tapping a tree is. And so the kickoff is February 1st. What is, over the course of kind of when the sap is running, what can we describe a little bit like what to expect of how much sap will be collected, what to do with it, when to check it, that temperature fluctuation? How does that influence how the sap runs?
Sure, absolutely. So we can't ever say, hey, the sap's going to start to run February 15th. We don't know. It really is weather dependent. So the conditions for when the sap starts to run are you have temperatures above zero during the day and below zero at night. It also has to do with the position of the sun. So the tree picks up on all these things in the environment and says, hey, it's time for the sap to start to run. What I always describe to people, the sap is kind of, it's the energy drink, if you will, for the tree. The tree has gone dormant. So in the previous summer, it made excess energy. It stored that energy in the root system in the form of sap. It then goes dormant through the winter. Now it's waking up. It wants to start to grow leaves. So what does it do? It takes the sap that it's collected and the energy that's collected in its root system, and that travels up through the tree and out to the branches and helps to start the growth of the tree and helps the leaves to start to bud. So the tree knows, based on the environmental conditions, when it's the right time for it to start for that sap to go and for it to start to wake up for the spring. So we follow the lead of other maple syrup producers. The Ministry of Environment is very good about putting information out on their website. And then I will tell everyone, hey, now it's time for us to all start tapping our trees. So we tap our trees, and then we do collections regularly. With storage of the sap, you can store it for a few days, as long as it stays in a cool, dry place, out of the sun, and the temperature remains basically below 5 degrees Celsius, so around fridge temperature. If you leave it in a snowbank, it's going to stay at that temperature. If you could take it inside and put it in a fridge, that's great. But we try to collect once we've tapped, we'll collect twice a week. We'll take that sap and we'll boil it down immediately. So once the season starts, I basically have a continuous boil with the maple syrup making process. And so people will come, they'll bring me their sap, I'll collect it, I'll weigh it, and then from the total product of syrup that is produced, people will get a share back. Some people have tapped elm trees before and said they didn't get any syrup. They still get some of the product that's produced. So there's a minimum everyone gets, which is 250 mils, which is a little bottle. But the most you'll get is everyone is a liter per tap, which is pretty good. So we kind of all collect together and then we share in it. One of the things that I do with this project is I tap trees at John McCrae Public School, which is something that I always like doing. So they have a standing bush of maple trees. You can see them if you go past the school. It's on Water Street, and we tap about 20 to 25 of those trees. It tends to be a school project. Each of the class picks a tree and they tap it, and then they look at how much sap they get from each tree. And it tends to be, a thing that the kids do at the end of the day, and then they collect up all the sap and I'll take it off. So there's a bunch of sap that's flowing in from the school, flowing in from individuals. I tap a few of my own trees to add to the volume of sap that's produced. And so in the end, I'll probably collect around between 4,000 and 5,000 liters of sap. Boil that all down, we'll end up with 100 to 125 liters of syrup.
That's a lot of syrup just from our community here in Guelph, all made locally. I think this is such a great project. And so a lot of people, like, for example, I know I just have one maple tree in my yard, but what if I, like John McCrae, have like a nice grove of maple trees in my yard? How many taps can I participate in for the urban sugaring project?
So I've had people approach me and say, hey, I want to do 20 taps. So The problem with that is I've limited and said the capacity we have for the project is 150 taps. So the most any individual can have is 4 taps. And this way we can make sure there's a good distribution and everyone gets to tap their trees. Typically people have 1 or 2 taps.
Yeah. So if you just to kind of give people about the idea of them, what's involved, you set up the tap, and then once it starts running, that's the time to really pay attention and to see when that bucket gets full, empty the bucket into the food grade storage bucket that we get, and then twice a week come drop it off to you at the pickup locations.
Yeah, that's correct. And one of the things I always tell people to do is to taste their sap, see what it tastes like. A couple of things they're looking for. One, if it was to go off, it's typically going to have a mold. So when you looked at it, it would be cloudy. You would taste it. It would not taste as sweet. It might taste bitter. The other thing that we always have to look out for is at the very end of the season, as the sap run changes and the leaves start to bud, it'll change the sap itself. And people call it a buddy sap, but it becomes bitter. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to collect sap that's bitter and then mix it in with the rest, because we're pooling it all together, and so it can actually make a boiling batch go off. So we had that 2 years ago where someone brought us some sap, and when we boiled it down, it kind of made the whole batch taste bitter, and so I kept the bottle of it to show people what the buddy syrup tastes like. But we want to try to avoid that because there's a lot of time and energy goes into making the syrup. So as a participant, yes, you have to pay attention. You have to tap the tree when I ask you to tap it. Then you have to make sure you bring your sap on a regular basis so we can pick it up and turn it into syrup. And then also taste it and look at it and make sure it's not gone off or it's not gone buddy yet.
Yeah, that's important because it is a community project. We're all in this together to make a good batch of sap. And so what happens at the end of the season? So the students at John McCrae are learning about syrup, and then we have this kickoff event to start. What's the event that kind of ends the syrup season? Yeah,
that's something else I'm really proud about with this project, that we have a maple syrup festival. So we call it right now Guelph's Maple Syrup Festival. It's called Syrup in the City. It happens at John McCrae Public School. This year it's going to be Saturday, March the 28th. We do it as a co-project between ourselves and the Headwaters program, which is the outdoor education program of the Upper District School Board, as well as the students at John McCrae. So all the groups work together. They typically do a wonderful pancake breakfast. We have groups coming in that are representing Guelph as far as typically in the past we've had the Guelph Hiking Club, we've had Guff, which is the Guelph Friends of Forest Friends, and we've had a number. And we've had a number of other groups that have come in and talked about interacting with the environment. We do hands-on displays, so you can get out, you can tap a tree yourself, you can cut a log pioneer style, and we also will have a distributor who comes and he sells organic maple syrup, as well as cotton candy flavored maple syrup flavored cotton candy. So it's a fun day. People can come and hang out, learn about maple syrup, and enjoy a nice pancake breakfast.
Sounds like a great event. Pancakes to start the syrup season and pancakes to end the syrup season.
I could have pancakes all the time.
I could too. And so thank you so much for being here today. And I feel like the public has kind of given them a little bit more of a better idea of where their food comes from. And here on Food Farm Talk, we're always talking about food and agricultural issues, and the idea of connecting people to local food and giving them the opportunity to learn more about how they can use untapped resources in the cities like maple trees. I think this is such an excellent project. So I just let's go over just the details of the event that's coming up. The kickoff event is on February 1st, Saturday morning from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m.
From 9 to 11:30 a.m.?
9 to 11:30 a.m.
And it's at the Church of the Apostles, which is 86 Glasgow Street North. It's a free pancake breakfast, so come on. get free pancakes, and we have maple syrup that we made from last year that I put aside, and we're going to be serving at the breakfast, so you can try out and see what the maple syrup is like from the project. And then we'll be distributing the kits. They're $10 each for a kit, plus a $10 deposit, and a kit is a tap, a bucket, and another bucket to carry the sap and bring it to me.
Yeah, and Church of the Apostles is a physically accessible location. And also, if you have kind of more questions about the urban sugaring projects, or you need a few more tools to start this project, the Guelph Tool Library is another great resource. The Guelph Tool Library is located at 131 Ontario Street in Tytler Public School. It is not a physically accessible location. We do have a phone number that you can call, and someone can come down to meet you at the library. And you can find out more at the Guelph Tool Library's website as well, guelphtoolllibrary.org.
That's great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, John, and running this amazing project in our community. I'm really excited for sugaring season, and hopefully we have the right weather. It's been a bit of a wonky winter so far, but hopefully from, months of February and March, we'll have that below freezing at night and above freezing during the day, so we can get that sap running. All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for listening to Food Farm Talk on CFRU Radio 93.3 FM here in Guelph. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Food Farm Talk. See you next week for another exciting edition.